If you're feeling a touch of loneliness tonight, or if the day has left you weary and your thoughts are still wandering, stay right here with me. There's no need to hurry anywhere. Dim the lights. Wrap yourself in something soft. Let the outside world slip away for a little while. Tonight, we're traveling far, out to the wild, wind-swept edge of the Atlantic, where an old lighthouse has stood like a quiet sentinel for more than 3 decades. No neon signs, no traffic hum, no voices echoing down crowded streets, just the vast, restless sea, the low murmur of wind through the rocks, and waves that roll in with the patience of centuries, whispering secrets to the shore, and living here day after day, year after year, in perfect solitude, with only the ocean and that faithful light for company, is a man the fishermen and townsfolk still mention in hushed, respectful tones. His name is Thomas Hale. The lighthouse perches on a narrow spit of dark, jagged rock that thrusts itself defiantly into the open water, as if daring the sea to claim it. It isn't a true island, just a thin, stubborn finger of stone, supporting a tall white tower, painted in fading layers, and a modest wooden cottage pressed close against its base for shelter. In daylight, the place has a kind of serene, almost holy stillness. A lone fishing trawler might chug slowly past. On the horizon, its wake a brief silver scar on the blue. Gulls circle overhead with their plaintive cries, then drift away on the wind. After that, silence returns, thick, unbroken, the sort of quiet that settles deep into your bones and lets you hear the soft thump of your own pulse, if you stand still long enough. But when the sun finally sinks below the rim of the world and the sky deepens to bruised indigo, then velvet black, the atmosphere shifts entirely. The evening breeze sharpens, carrying the clean metallic bite of salt, and the faint cold mist that clings to everything. Waves begin to strike the rocks with a slow, deliberate cadence. Boom, pause, boom, pause, like the deep, even breathing of some enormous sleeping creature. And as true night claims the sky, the great lamp atop the tower stirs to life. Its mechanism hums faintly, almost imperceptibly. Then the beam begins, its ancient, patient rotation, one measured sweep, then another. A warm, golden finger of light reaches out across miles of ink-black water, slicing through fog and darkness, like a gentle, unwavering promise. Hold on, you are not forgotten. Someone is still here, keeping watch. Thomas Hale has tended that promise for so many years now that the exact count has faded into irrelevance. 30 years, perhaps 35. He no longer marks the calendar with the same care he once did. He is the keeper, the one who ensures the light never winks out, no matter if the night is mirror calm or if a nor'easter is raging, trying to rip the tower from its roots. In the small harbors and fishing villages dotting the nearby coast, his name still surfaces in quiet conversations. Thomas Hale. They say, over coffee at the diner or while mending nets on the pier. Good man, quiet, keeps to himself out there. He rarely sets foot ashore these days. When he does, it's a brief, purposeful visit. A sack of flour, a tin of tea, fresh wicks and oil for the lamp, a few cans of soup, a nod to the shopkeeper, maybe a brief word about the weather. Then he's back in his small boat, rowing or motoring toward the rock before the tide turns against him. His evenings follow a rhythm, smoothed by decades of repetition, like a stone polished by the sea itself. As the final sliver of daylight bleeds away, Thomas steps out of the cottage door and stands on the narrow ledge of rock. He plants his feet wide against the wind, hands in his pockets, and simply looks. He doesn't scan for ships or search the horizon for signs. He just stands. After enough years in this place, you come to realize that presence itself can be an act of devotion, letting the salt wind comb through your hair, feeling the subtle tremor of each wave against stone, watching the last color drain from the sky until only stars and the turning beam remain. Out there, beyond the reach of his light, vessels glide past like slow-moving constellations, pinpricks of white and red on distant decks, wink in the blackness. Thomas has learned to read them, the way others read clouds. A steady course might mean a tanker bound for Boston, with iron ore or grain. Flickering navigation lights could belong to a container ship headed south to warmer ports. Sometimes he imagines the people aboard, a young deckhand on his first voyage, staring at the same stars Thomas sees, a captain in the wheelhouse, sipping black coffee, and thinking of a wife and children waiting in a lighted house far away. He wonders what stories they carry, what dreams keep them sailing through the night. After a time, long enough for the chill to settle into his joints, he turns back inside. The cottage is small, unpretentious, every inch worn with use and care. A scarred oak table stands in the center, flanked by two mismatched chairs. The armchair by the window, deep, sagging, upholstered in threadbare green plaid, has shaped itself perfectly to his body over the years. An old tube radio sits on a shelf, pulling in faint AM stations when the weather cooperates, snatches of big band music, weather reports, the occasional voice reading news from a world that feels increasingly distant. A cast iron stove occupies one corner, its black surface gleaming faintly from years of polishing. Near the single window hang 4 or 5 photographs in simple frames, their colors muted by time. A younger Thomas in oilskins on a heaving deck, Margaret laughing on a sunlit beach, hair blowing, the two of them together on their wedding day, standing outside the little white church with the sea behind them. He sets kettle on the stove, plain black tea every night. No sugar, no lemon, nothing fancy. But the ritual matters, measuring the loose leaves into the chip teapot, listening for the kettle's rising whistle, pouring the steaming water, watching it darken to amber in the old china mug Margaret chose for him at a summer market stall 30-odd years ago. All of it fills the room with something warm, something alive. When the kettle sings its soft, familiar note, Thomas allows himself the smallest of smiles. That sound has become his evening companion. He carries the mug to the armchair, settles in, and lets his gaze drift to the window. From here, the lighthouse beam is visible, sweeping the sea in its endless, hypnotic circle. Round and round it goes. He has watched it on calm nights and in the teeth of gales, yet each pass still touches something deep within him. The light feels almost sentient, searching, reaching, refusing to give up. And with every golden arc across the water, the same quiet, persistent question surfaces in his mind, soft as a sigh he has never shared with another living soul. Will that ship come back tonight? No one ashore knows the answer he seeks, or even that he is seeking anything at all. Some assume he is simply an old man who has grown to love solitude more than society. Others suppose he was once a sailor who finally wearied of the sea's relentless demands. The truth is quieter, more tender, and far more painful. Decades ago, Thomas was not a keeper of lights. He was a working seaman, salt-crusted and sun-browned, with the horizon always pulling at him like a tide. He ran routes from the frigid waters off Newfoundland to the sun-soaked bays of the Carolinas, where the air smelled of pine and magnolia. Life aboard was brutal at times, deck awash with green water, rigging singing in high winds, nights when sleep came in snatches, tied to a bunk, so you wouldn't be thrown out. Yet he never once wished himself elsewhere, because it was on those voyages that he met Margaret. She was no seafarer. She taught 3rd grade in a modest coastal village, the kind of town where everyone knew your name, and your parents' names too. One golden summer afternoon, his freighter tied up at the pier after a long run from Halifax. Margaret stood on the wharf with a small suitcase, waiting for the afternoon ferry to the next town across the bay. The wind caught her hair like a sail, and the slanting sunlight turned her profile to soft gold from the rail of the ship. Thomas watched her, and in that single suspended instant, the clamor of the docks, the shouts of longshoremen, the creak of lines, all of it fell away. The world narrowed to her standing there, and something inside him shifted forever. They spoke that afternoon until the light turned amber, then rose. Simple things at first, the sea he knew so well, the children in her classroom who begged for stories of pirates and icebergs. She listened with bright, attentive eyes, laughing at his tales in a way that made every storm he'd endured feel worthwhile. After that, he contrived reasons, good ones, to bring his ship back to that harbor whenever the route allowed. Those brief visits lengthened into letters mailed from distant ports, then into promises exchanged under starlight, then into vows spoken in the little white church overlooking the water. They built a life together in a clapboard house near the shore. Margaret filled the yard with roses, lavender, and hollyhocks. Their fragrance drifted through open windows on summer evenings. Thomas found work on the docks, repairing hulls, caulking seams, teaching younger men the knots his hands still remembered by feel. They were never rich, but they were content. Every evening they walked the beach together, hand in hand, sat on the same flat boulder, worn smooth by tides, and watched the ships pass under a canopy of stars. Margaret especially loved those far-off lights. "Look," she'd whisper, pointing. "Each one is someone's story, someone going home." Thomas would squeeze her hand and think that he had already found his. The years passed in gentle succession. Birthdays marked with homemade cake, anniversaries with walks at sunset, Sunday mornings with coffee and the local paper spread across the table. Thomas believed, truly believed, that this quiet happiness would stretch on forever. But time and fate rarely consult our hopes. One bitter winter, the sickness arrived without warning. Quiet at first, then insistent, then cruel. The house that had echoed with her voice grew hushed. Doctors visited with furrowed brows and careful words. In months, the color left her cheeks. The laughter faded from her eyes. Then, on a gray morning, before dawn had even considered rising, Margaret slipped away in his arms, peaceful at last, leaving behind a silence so vast it swallowed everything else. After that, the town became unrecognizable. Streets he had walked 1,000 times felt too wide, too empty. Their house echoed with absence. When the position of lighthouse keeper opened on the isolated rock, Thomas accepted, almost without thought. He packed lightly the china mug, a handful of photographs, the sweater she had knitted during long winter evenings, and left the rest behind. The door closed on his old life with a soft, final click. That was more than 30 years ago. Every night since, he has climbed the spiral iron staircase inside the tower. The steps creak in the same familiar sequence, like an old friend greeting him. At the top, he steps onto the narrow balcony, grips the cold railing, and gazes into the black expanse below. Sometimes a freighter passes, far offshore. The beam glances off its hull, like a fleeting caress. Thomas always raises a hand in silent salute, though he knows the gesture goes unseen. To him, the lighthouse is no mere occupation. It is a vow, renewed each dusk, that no matter how vast the ocean or how impenetrable the night, someone remains on watch, someone keeps a light burning so that others, strangers, sailors, lost souls, might find their way. And with every sweep of that beam, the question returns, soft and persistent as the tide. Will that ship ever come back? The ocean at night possesses a peculiar magic. It draws thoughts upward and outward, makes them linger, like mist over water. Questions that seem small in daylight grow large and luminous under the stars. After inspecting the lamp, one particular evening, Thomas remained on the balcony far longer than necessary. He leaned into the railing, letting the cold steel bite his palms. The wind moved gently through his silver hair, carrying the sharp tang of salt, the faint mineral scent of distant rain, the clean wildness of open water. Behind him, the mechanism hummed. The beam turned, slow, inexorable, faithful. Each golden pass felt like a question, asked of the darkness, a search for something or someone long absent. He stayed until the chill had worked deep into his bones, until his fingers stiffened. Still he lingered. 30 years is an extraordinary span to hold vigil for anything. Some nights he wondered if he even remembered precisely what he awaited. An explanation, a farewell never spoken, or merely some small token that the waiting itself had not been in vain? At length, he exhaled a long plume of breath that clouded white in the night air, turned, and made his slow way down the creaking stairs. Inside, he fed another split log to the stove. Flames leaped eagerly, casting dancing shadows across the walls, warming the faded photographs. He refilled the china mug, still warm from earlier, and settled once more into the armchair. Through the window, the sea lay dark and immense, unchanging. Then a change, a faint spark, pricked the horizon, so dim he nearly dismissed it as a low star, but it moved, slowly, purposefully. Thomas rose. He crossed to the glass, eyes narrowed. Not a star, not a trick of moonlight, a vessel's running light. He had watched thousands pass in his time here. This one was different, its course cautious, almost searching, as though whoever held the wheel was looking for a particular mark in the night. He shrugged on, the old wool sweater Margaret had knitted, the one with the slightly uneven cable stitch on the left sleeve, and stepped outside. The wind met him, fresh and cold, scented with brine. He stood on the rock ledge, watching the distant glow strengthen. Minutes stretched into tens of minutes. The light drew nearer until it resolved into a small wooden skiff, a single-hander, modest and workmanlike. The engine throttled back, then cut. Silence flooded in, broken only by the lap of water against hull and rock. A man stepped ashore, mid-30s perhaps, face lined with fatigue, but eyes calm and steady. He secured the painter with practiced knots, then looked up at Thomas. "Good evening, sir," he said, voice low and wind-roughened. "I hope I'm not intruding? I strayed farther offshore than intended. Your light was the first steady thing I saw, so I thought it best to come in rather than risk the dark." Thomas nodded, the old keeper's nod, calm and welcoming. "Night water has a way of turning even the surest hand," he replied quietly. "Come inside, the stove's going, and the tea's hot." The stranger followed him into the cottage. His gaze traveled the room, table, armchair, radio, photographs, lingering a moment on the framed images. Thomas poured a second mug, handed it over. They sat near the fire. For a long stretch, neither spoke, only the pop and snap of burning wood, the muffled heartbeat of waves outside. Then the young man broke the quiet. "I grew up hearing stories about this place," he said. "My grandfather talked about it often." Thomas lifted an eyebrow. "Did he?" He called it the light that never failed, said it was more than just a beacon. "Your grandfather? Who was he?" A brief pause, then the name, spoken softly. "Daniel Carter." The mug trembled, in Thomas's grip. He set it down with deliberate care. The visitor went on. He was a mate on a freighter back then. Ran into a brutal storm right off this coast. Waves like black walls. Wind that screamed like it wanted to tear the ship apart. They thought they were finished. Then, through the rain and spray, they saw this light, steady, turning. It gave them a bearing, showed them the safe channel past the rocks. Thomas stared into the flames. Memories rose unbidden. That night of fury, the tower shuddering under each gust, him hauling oil and trimming wicks by lantern light, climbing the stairs again and again, because instinct told him lives depended on the beam staying bright. He had never seen the ship. He had only believed it was there. The young man reached into an inside pocket and produced a worn E. Granddad used to say, some people never realize how wide the ripple of their kindness spreads, how one small, steady act can touch hundreds, maybe thousands, without them ever seeing the faces. I think you might be one of those people, sir. A small, genuine smile. Thank you for the tea, and thank you for everything. After the skiff's engine faded into the distance, Thomas climbed the tower stairs once more. He stepped onto the balcony. The ocean stretched endless beneath him, dark and eternal. Wind stirred his hair. The beam turned behind him, slow, sure, unchanging. But the ache of waiting that had lived inside his chest for 3 decades had quietly dissolved. All those years he had imagined. He kept the light for one ship alone, one unfinished story, one lost connection. Now the truth settled over him, like dawn after long night. That single beam had traveled farther than he could ever see. It had guided strangers through storms, restored hope to frightened crews, reminded countless souls that darkness is never absolute. Lives he would never meet had been altered because he had stayed, because he had refused to let the light go out. The beam swept again, golden, faithful, beautiful. In that moment, the lighthouse ceased to feel like a refuge of solitude. It became something greater, a waypoint for journeys, a guardian of unseen passages, a testament that the smallest, most steadfast light, tended with love, with memory, with quiet resolve, can reach across oceans and decades to change the world in ways no one can fully measure. If you've stayed with me through this long, gentle telling, I want to leave you with one soft thought as you close your eyes tonight. No matter how heavy the darkness feels right now, no matter how long you've waited for an answer, a return, a sign, there is always a light somewhere that has been kept burning with you in mind. It might be a literal beacon on a lonely rock. It might be the memory of someone who loved you fiercely. It might be the quiet kindness of a stranger you'll never thank. Whatever form it takes, that light exists because someone, maybe many someones, chose to keep it going. So keep your own small flame alive too, even when it flickers. The world is brighter, warmer, safer, because you do. And if tonight's story wrapped you in a little comfort, eased the loneliness, even for a moment, or simply gave your heart a quiet place to rest, would you consider subscribing to the channel? It takes only a second, costs nothing, and helps me continue sharing these bedtime tales with anyone who needs them on nights like this. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening, for staying, for letting the story in. Sleep deeply now, friend. The light is still burning for you. Sweet dreams.